Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. I'm continuing the rejection series, and today I'm talking about some of the things that we do when we feel rejected. Just as a recap, if you've not listened to yesterday's podcast or the day before I talked about where we introduced the rejection series, and yesterday I talked about what it feels like in our bodies when we're rejected. Some of the things that happens when we're rejected, how we're triggered, and the responses in our bodies. And I invited you to kind of notice what's happening in your body and some of the things that you can do to overcome. And so today I'm talking about some of the things that you do, some of the things that we do when we feel rejected. And I say feel rejected because sometimes we're not really rejected, but we feel it. And so there's some things that we do when we feel something that is similar because of an experience that we have. When we feel rejected, some of the things that we often do, and you might recognize yourself in some of this. So the response I want to focus on is the fawn response. Not We know, and we're maybe you're familiar with fight, flight, or freeze response, but I want to talk about some of the other things that we do that comes under the fawn response that we do when rejection happens. Now, rejection, as you might know, is not comfortable. It's not easy. It leaves us feeling, it's a lot of uncomfortable feelings that we have to try and work our way through. And sometimes some of the things that we do to try and get ourselves back quickly to a place of safety, and I'm saying safety in quotes because it's not safety. It kind of just stops the feelings for a while. It doesn't solve the issue, and it doesn't help you manage and cope with rejection. It doesn't strengthen your muscles in being able to understand rejection and understand what happens in your body and your automatic response to rejection. It doesn't help you to do that. It kind of puts it off and gets you back to a place where you feel comfortable again, but it doesn't deal with the root of the problem. So I want to talk about some of the things that happens when we do that. So we develop the response to the fawn response is like people pleasing, and we do that to avoid conflict. You're feeling rejected, you're experiencing a sense of rejection, and you do something that you think might be acceptable, desirable to these people who you feel rejected you or who have indeed rejected you. And you do things that you feel might be agreeable to them because you feel that might make them like you, or that might make them spend time with you or invite you to the thing, or include you in their circle and in their group. And I was speaking this weekend, and I encourage adults to really teach children about this response, because sometimes young people get into this place where they are pleasing a certain group of people because they want to be accepted, because acceptance is so important. They're identifying themselves, they're figuring out who they are. And in this time, acceptance is really important. So though we as adults might know, and I say might because sometimes we're still learning what happens to us when we experience rejection, how the things that we default to when we experience rejection, how we default to people pleasing. And sometimes we learn how to do that. And I especially wants to speak to the mother wound, how we learn how to develop people pleasing, because that is what was used to appease her or to appease our caregiver. That appeased them. And so we learn how to do the thing to appease people, right? And we do that as a way to avoid sometimes the feeling of overwhelm, the feeling of not, we don't have safety in our bodies, and there are things that we can do to work to regain safety in our bodies. But if our automatic thing is to people please, is to do things that we think that people might do, is to sacrifice our boundaries, is to say what they want to hear or go the extreme. If that's our automatic response to rejection, then we're going to do that more and more and more. You might be challenged to do that. Now, and I said, I want to say as well, sometimes it's a perceived rejection, because sometimes we are not rejected, but we experience it. We experience the same kind of feelings. But the times when you are rejected, here are some things that you can do to overcome. Now, one of the things, I did a whole 2 weeks on this. And so if you haven't listened to that, go back in the podcast and listen. Boundaries. one of the things that we can do is to set good boundaries. That helps us when we to not default to people pleasing, when we can set good boundaries. There are many places where we experience boundaries, where people boundary themselves with us. Many places where people do that, boundaries themselves with us. And we have no choice but to accept their boundaries. So let's look at it this way. If you're in a circle or you're there and people are planning something and they don't invite you along and you're experiencing that feeling of rejection again, we can understand that that's their boundary, right? That's their boundary. They're not inviting you. It doesn't mean it's your fault or anything is wrong with you. It means that they are boundarying themselves, and unfortunately, the boundary excludes you. Now, I'm not saying that as if it's something easy to bear. It's not. I know. I've had to live on the edges of groups, right? And learn how to be comfortable with who I am. And you can learn how to be comfortable with who you are, and know that even though those people won't include you, it's sometimes nothing to do with you. And even if you're not aligned, your needs and theirs, your gifts and theirs, your character and theirs, all of those things can be true. And it just isn't the people. They might not want to spend time with you, not because anything is wrong with you, but because you're out of alignment, right? So you might be a deep thinker and you want to have conversations that are deep and meaningful. They might not be able to have conversations that are deep and meaningful, so it's not aligned. You might like to bake savory things and they like to cook sweets. It just isn't aligned. So sometimes when you have your rational brain on, you can talk to yourself about that, and you can let yourself know that this rejection is not about me. Because when you're used to rejection your whole life, it can tell you a story about your worth. And when it happens again in adult life, you can think that it's because I'm not worth it. It's because I'm not lovable. It's because I'm not good enough. If I was good enough, those people would want to be with me. They'd want to spend time with me. But it's not because you're not good enough. It's not because you're unlovable. There are people who will love you, even if you've made all the mistakes in your life and you're coming to an awareness of those mistakes and you're understanding yourself a little bit better and you're learning and you're growing. Give yourself the grace to learn and to grow. Also, say what you mean. Say what you mean. So if it's yes and if it's no, say that. Okay? Because when we experience rejection and we want to be with these people, when they come with really big, bold requests that are completely out of order, you might be tempted to say yes when you want to say no. Say no and mean no. Because when you're going to do the work on understanding your worth, you will know that it wasn't because you're not worth it, and it wasn't because you're unlovable. So when they come with requests that is really out of order, learn to say no and mean no. Accept that people's responses is not a reflection of your worth. I say that already. It's not a reflection of your worth. Their responses, their choice to exclude, their choice to do something else, their choice to make a different decision. That is their choice. It's not, I'm trying to position myself. It's not a reflection of you and who you are. Okay. And the last thing I want to say is don't rescue. Because sometimes we might go in and rescue. We might do things that we know we're breaking all of our own boundaries and all of the decisions that we make for ourselves, because we believe that is something that's going to make them want to include us and it's going to make them like us. It might not. It might not. If you're sacrificing your boundaries so that other people can be comfortable, that's not the best response. So know that it's not a reflection of your worth. Don't default to people pleasing to get people. You feel like this might make people like you. Don't sacrifice your boundaries and give up your sense of self because you feel like if I do that, then I'm going to be included, I'm going to be liked. Because it's not about you. So what you need to do is to understand how you interact with rejection. What are the things that you experience when you experience rejection? What does it feel like for you? And what does it make you want to do? And those are the areas where you do the work. That's where the growth needs to happen for you. And so it's really important that you do the work in those areas so that you can manage rejection in a more emotionally mature way and you're not defaulting to people pleasing. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join me on the next story.